In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 ways to draft and play awesome games of Magic with just 2 players. Of course, most of these can be tweaked and adapted to your playstyle or needs and can usually include an extra player or 2 with no problem. Now, before we dive into these awesome 2-player draft formats, I will just say these are much easier to pull off with a cube of some sort. Quite simply, a cube is a collection of cards you can use to draft over and over again rather than cracking real booster packs every time. If you'd like to check out some videos on Cube, I've included those in the description. If you don't want to go that deep, honestly, any pile of random cards will probably get you pretty far, and of course you can always crack boosters if you have the budget to do so. So let's jump in with the first fantastic draft format for 2 players, and that's Sealed. In Sealed, each player receives 6 packs or 90 random cards and builds a 40-card limited style deck. I like Sealed since it's easy to set up and gets you up and running and playing games of Magic quickly. You do skip the drafting portion and go straight to deck building. There is also a nice skill balancing effect here, as it's harder for the better player to win every time since they can't flex their skills in the draft portion. That could be a pro or con depending on who you're playing with, but I consider it a pro in most casual settings. Decks tend to be on the weaker side since you can't formulate a tight strategy during the draft, but you could always add more cards if you wanted to increase the power of the decks overall. Sealed might be my most common way to play 2-player limited Magic, and I can't recommend it enough. Now up next, our first true draft format is Rochester Draft. To start, get 6 packs of 15 cards, either in cards from your cube or random cards in your collection or booster packs. Starting with the first pack, lay all 15 cards face up on the table for both players to see. Give players about 20 to 30 seconds to review the pack, and then take turns drafting. Once all cards are chosen, repeat this process, but of course the other player will draft first. A big pro of this draft format is that it's very skill intensive and rewards players who are paying very close attention to what your opponent is picking. This challenges you in ways that a regular draft doesn't. But be warned, hate drafting is encouraged and rewarded. If you can see the strategy your opponent is putting together, it's wise to hate draft key combo pieces or synergy pieces instead of something you may need for your own deck. That can be fun and uniquely challenging to navigate that draft, but it definitely isn't for everyone. This can be easily adapted to more players. Just add 3 additional packs for every extra player in the draft. Next up is Solomon Draft. To set up, you'll need 96 random non-land cards, this time in one large pile in the middle of the table. Determine who will draft first. The opposing player draws 8 cards from the top of the pile and splits it into 2 piles. This can either be 2 equal piles of 4, perhaps a pile of 5 and 3, or even 7-1 if you really wanted to. The other player will then choose which pile they want to keep for themselves and which pile to give their opponent. Then alternate rolls until all 96 cards have been drafted. 8 goes into 96 12 times, so you'll draft 12 packs. If you've played with the card Fact or Fiction, you know how fun this decision can be, trying to get your opponent to give you the cards you want and making their decisions difficult. This gets your brain working in a different way than usual in a normal draft. I highly recommend this one. Our next 2-player draft is Winston Draft. You'll shuffle 90 non-land cards together into a big pile and place them in the middle of the table. Form 3 piles of 1 card each to start. When it's your turn to draft, pick up and look at the first pile. If you choose to draft it, great. Add it to your draft pool, and replace it with a card from the top of your starting 90 cards. If not, put it back, and add a card from the top of the big pile. That first pile should now have 2 cards. Pick up the next pile, decide if you want to draft it, and so on. If you don't want any of the 3 piles, take 1 card at random from the top of the deck. The next player goes looking at the first pile, which is now 2 cards. And if they put it back, it becomes 3 cards, and so on. Continue in this way until all cards have been drafted, build 40-card limited decks, and battle. The nice thing about this particular format is that it hides some information, since you'll only know about half of what your opponent is taking if you're paying really close attention, so you can read signals a little bit, but you can't really hate draft effectively. Next up is Winchester Draft, which, as the name suggests, combines elements of Rochester and Winston Draft into one format. You'll follow all the same rules as Winston Draft, the last one we talked about, for setup. Shuffle 90 non-land cards together, form 3 starting piles of 1 card each. However, unlike Winston Draft, which is face down, we'll be doing everything face up this time. Same as before, if you take a pile, replace it with a card from the top of the big pile. If not, add another card to it, again face up. This combines the fun pile drafting method from Winston Draft with the cutthroat nature and hate drafting of Rochester Draft if you find yourself enjoying that. Our next 2-player draft format is Pancake Draft. Start with 18 packs of 11 cards. Each player starts by picking up a pack and choosing 1 card from it. There should now be 10 cards left in both of your packs, which you will now pass to the other player simultaneously. You will now choose 2 cards to draft and 2 to burn, which means they are removed from the draft entirely. Pass your packs again, which now contain 6 cards, and choose 2 more cards. There should be 4 cards left in each pack, which aren't drafted. Draft all 18 packs of 11, and each player should end up with 45 cards in their draft pool. The biggest con of this format is you'll probably need to take notes on how exactly to run it. It's not the most intuitive thing in the world, but on the plus side, you're seeing more cards in this particular format, which should lead to stronger decks overall. You're also getting to read signals a bit by seeing the pack pass back and forth, and have a fun opportunity to burn 2 cards you don't want to play against. Or perhaps you pass the good cards, hoping it will come back to you. Now here, feel free to experiment with the size and number of packs, how many cards you want to draft at each phase if you want to play with the balance and overall power level of the decks, but this is how I learned this format and have found it quite fun. And finally, my 2-player draft format of choice, Grid Draft. In this format, you'll make 18 packs of 9 cards. Starting with the first pack, lay all 9 cards out in a 3x3 grid, face up for both players to see. Starting with the first player, they will draft a single column or row of 3 cards and add all of them to their draft pool. The next player chooses a single column or row, which might now contain only 2 cards, and adds those to their pool. The remaining cards are discarded and a new pack is laid out. The other player now gets to draft first. Continue like this until all cards are drafted. This has the face-up element of some of the other formats where you get to see what your opponent is drafting, but only kind of, since the extra cards they draft might not be the ones they actually want to play with. You can also make careful choices to grab cards you want for your deck, while also hate drafting at the same time. I find this draft also moves pretty quickly, which I really like. If these 2-player draft formats sound like fun, the best way to draft on the regular is with a cube. You should check out my video about how to immortalize your favorite set in your very own set cube, or perhaps a battle box might be more your speed if you're looking to build something a bit more portable and budget friendly. And if you made it this far, don't forget to drop a like and consider subscribing for future Magic the Gathering videos just like this one. I'll see you next time.